Well, hello there. I shall grace you today with my very angelic voice. Well, before I go on to do that, however, let me just quickly check the audio and then we'll talk a little bit about the changes I'm making to my approach here. And yeah, all right. Sorry about the break. Okay, so essentially, it's not going to be like revolutionary or anything. Um, but I noticed that I've been mostly just doing what essentially is a doodle, you know? And by that I mean these kinds of drawings here, where I sometimes have reference, sometimes I don't. And I just draw whatever I find interesting, right? Which has a very great benefit, I think, in certain aspects, if applied correctly in a way. So, you know, you can get a lot of things done, a lot of difficult things done, if you can find interest in doing them, right? In doing the tedious things, if you find interest in those, you can get very far. The issue is these kinds of reference drawings or doodles that I'm doing here, this kind of like random stuff here, this here, while interesting, and fun in the moment, and perhaps even like valuable in terms of a learning exercise, I think I am missing more of this type of work, more of the what I consider boring things, in a way. So, yes, I'll just try and put this in front. So, do this stuff first and then move on to do stuff like this, stuff like this kind of reference drawing here. And also a little bit of change in mindset, I guess, because like for the most or the longest time, I've considered like reference drawing as a way to cheat in a way, as something I shouldn't do, and that's neither very helpful nor is it, what I can actually. It brushes over what I can gain from doing this type of exercise, this type of drawing. And so the idea now is essentially that when I noticed that when I draw from reference, right, I I draw very differently, like the shapes, the confidence in line, basically everything I draw or everything that makes up a drawing, right? The making of marks rather. somehow improves or is just different from when I draw from pure imagination, you know? And the quality is just different. Though, of course, this was kind of like a freak accident, I guess. Kind of stuff. It's still funny to look at. Well, yes. So I just want to see this kind of reference drawing as a way to get accustomed and you know, in a way remember and retain this way of drawing, you know, like the way I make marks when I'm drawing from reference and all the other good stuff. So I'll see if I can like unify this, if I can keep the similar or the same kind of style in a way when I'm drawing. It's difficult to explain, but yes, I'll no longer see it as like some sort of thing I shouldn't be doing, especially if it's something I'm interested in. So anyway, for today, I thought since I want to improve on my mark making, I guess, and how confident I am in making these marks, right? I thought that I should disable my undo button on the tablet for now. So I don't know if that's actually a thing I can just disable on its own. All right. Disabled. I'll just disable it, whatever. I just made this like an extra program specific like hotkey for Critter. And it should be disabled now. Yes, okay, so I don't accidentally do this, you know? I want to slow down. And I want to get rid of this pressure that I've been building up to produce something that other people might be able to see as I don't know, valuable or useful or whatever. It's kind of like not necessarily performance anxiety, I guess, but in a similar vein to that, I suppose. I'm not too certain about it. But it's essentially like a kind of need, subconscious need to produce something, right? So let's say I only drew this like kind of pseudo mech thing tube, whatever, for the entire 2 hours yesterday. I would have probably told you, oh, that I'm not too happy about only having produced this, you know? I kind of want to get rid of that or keep this sort of feeling or idea in check, you know? I don't want this to overrule my you know, my how to say it, my will to try new things, you know, because trying new things in a real way means failing, you know. That's why they are new. You haven't done this before, so you'll likely fail. Rather, you will fail, really. I mean, anything else is probably just hubris, arrogance in a way. I don't know, whatever. I'm not, you know, trying to be some philosophy teacher here, but yeah, I just don't want this kind of feeling to produce, this need to produce something. I don't want it to control my journey too much. Like its existence is right and justified when I say have a client, right? I have a commission, which I don't have, but let's say I did, right? Let's say I did have a commission to produce a specific piece of art, right? Having this sort of pressure is then right and justified in its existence, you know. But when I'm trying to learn how to draw, like there's no place for this type of thought pattern, I guess, or feeling or whatever, however you want to describe it as, you know, or categorize it. So yeah, kind of want to keep that in check in mind to ensure I don't drive myself insane. Um, right. I wish there was like a sort of brush that you can't erase, you know, kind of like with fine liners or other such pens and utensils when drawing on paper, you know. Let me just write down regarding the journey, I guess, because it sounds nice. Regarding the journey. Um, learn to keep the need to perform or produce. Learn to keep the need to perform or produce in an acceptable way, in an learn to keep in check. Okay, so that's, I think, a very important point. Because if you get bound to your end product, right, you'll very quickly turn bitter, I think. And that's unfortunately a mistake I made. Let me show you what I mean. Did I do anything? Yes, I did change some things. So I made this mistake here with week 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, basically. With this drawing here, I tried making for ERB, right? I essentially focused too much on the outcome being perfect, you know, like I don't know. In a way, I started hating the image, you know, and I really don't want to work on it anymore. It's tilting me beyond belief, you know. I can't really, guess I can't really put it into words as to why that is, but it's essentially. Let me see if I can find. I watched a video yesterday or the day before from an artist on YouTube, and he essentially talked about this. And I think his video was about 6 out of 10. So he's talking about keeping his perfectionism in check, to not go insane, you know, learning new things, to not lose the will to learn new things. Because if you focus on the end result as having to be perfect to be allowed to exist, right? I mean, in my case, it's less so the case for me not allowing it to exist, and more so the case of overworking a specific aspect of my art to the point where I just get exhausted at looking at it, which is essentially what I did here. So I guess I do have the answer to why I dislike this image, you know, which is also the reason why I ended up doing several passes of this, because I didn't know the pose, I didn't know what I actually wanted to produce. I just knew I wanted to do some herb fan art, right? But I approached it in a suboptimal way, I guess you could say, where I focused on perfecting the image, putting the perfect lines down. And I'm just not at the level where I can do that, um, to the extent that I'm expecting myself to do it, I guess you could say. So this expectation of perfectly producing when you are still learning. So like even this art piece was supposed to be, a test of skill in a way. Not in an abstract way, but in a clear, straightforward way of, okay, I'm gonna try and see how far I can get making a piece of fan art, right? The result is essentially this, right? Not very far. not not very far is the answer. But yes, back to the video though. It was talking about like, trying to organize and to, in a way, rein in this need of production, what the fuck, of producing the perfect image, And so he talked about, the standard being very arbitrary, and I agree to that actually. Like, for example, right? I think we can all agree that, let me see if I actually have an image of him here. But let's just go by common internet knowledge, right? If you've been an artist or in the art sphere in a way, or if you seek out new and interesting artists on your own, I'm sure you've heard of Wallop, right? Sure you've seen his images. Sure you've seen his like 3D artwork. Basically, he's a digital artist, right? I'm sure most of you also have seen the work of Murata. What's his name? The artist for the One Punch Man manga, right? Murata Yusuke, is that him? Maybe. No, maybe not. No, okay, it is him. It is him. It is him. Okay. Yusuke Murata. Murata Yusuke. Right. All right. I don't know his Twitter handle, but yes, I'm sure you've known, this guy too. I'm sure you've seen some art of, let's say, Bob Ross or whatever, right? Sure, you've seen art of Bob Ross. Point I'm trying to make: we can all agree that these guys are great artists. They produce great pieces of art. But when you try to go down the ladder of skill, in a sense, it becomes very difficult to create like this cut-off point, where art is terrible and where art is really, really good. That doesn't mean that there aren't such categories, right? They are very much valid and existing. It's just difficult to point them out, in like in a mathematical way, say, 1 equals 1, right? 1 plus 1 equals 2. That kind of mathematical approach is a bit more difficult because it's more complex and not all variables are necessarily known. And even the greatest of artists, though it would elude most people, still have a lot to learn, you know? I doubt any of the people I mentioned would say of themselves that they are the greatest artists to have existed, right? I doubt any of them would actually claim that about themselves. That doesn't mean that they aren't great artists, you know? They are certainly a lot better than I am, you know? But here's the question then, right? If we can't really describe how you are good in art, right? How do you learn to become better, right? How can you train something that you can't really say categorize properly? You know, it's in a way the question of, let's say you have a piece of sheet metal, right, or a rope or whatever, and this hypothetical metal of sheet or sheet of metal, sorry, metal of sheet, what the hell, this sheet of metal, right, has dimensions you just don't know. You don't know how long or how thick or how wide this metal sheet is supposed to be. How can you create that metal sheet, right? You have to cut it out, let's say, from a larger piece of metal. But nobody is telling you the dimensions. How do you cut it out, right? It's basically impossible. I guess no, maybe the analogy doesn't quite work. Anyway, before I confuse myself and you more than I have to, the reason I brought all of this up was essentially just to talk about like a standard for your image quality, let's say. And so you can split this in many different parts, and I think I talked about this before in terms of 5 pillars. I think it was form. Let me think. Form, color, value. Form, color, value. Color, value. I don't quite remember. I'd have to look it up again. I don't want to say just anything to fill the empty air. Okay, yeah, I'm getting sidetracked again. Sorry. So it's basically what the video was about, and the point I'm trying to make is you have to find a compromise for your art. So since you can't produce, most likely, stuff that someone like Bob Ross can produce, or someone like Wallop, or someone like Murata, or the Korean guy, what's his name, that passed away, Kim Yong-gi, I think. I'm not quite sure. But yes, since you can't produce the art that these guys produce, right? And let's say this is what you want to produce. Since you aren't there yet, you have to make a compromise, right? Now, the question is whether or not you make that compromise comfortably within your skill level, or if you push yourself yet still beyond something that you can't produce. So let's say your image quality is, if we have, say, Wallop as the 10, right, as the goal to achieve, your art is somewhere on a 2, maybe 2.5. right? And you set your standard not relative to your skill level, but relative to the goal's skill level, right? In this case, Wallop's art. And you go then, okay, well, even though I'm a 2 at doing art, right? I'll expect myself to produce 6 out of 10s compared to Murata or Wallop or Bob Ross or whoever else, right? There's a billion different artists. And it's like, okay, well, it's not really helpful, because the point that we're trying to make here, that I'm trying to make here, and the video I was watching is essentially that you have to, in a way, let go of the constant need to achieve your goal. Let me backtrack that a little bit. What I mean is temperance, I suppose. That's the point I'm trying to make. You have to be able to accept that you're terrible at art, you know, and that while you may have the hypothetical 2 out of 5 of 10 in terms of image quality in relation to one of the great artists that you look up to, right? As I mentioned before, Wallop, for example. While you may have that theoretical ability, the reality of your day-to-day drawings is that they are more like a 2 or maybe a 2.75, 1.75, you know, at most a 2, and when you're lucky a 2.5, right? So you have to actually pull that standard down, and relative to what you are able to make at most, you have to be like, okay, if I produce something that's 6 out of 10, that's about half as good as I could if I really, 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 really sat down for the next 120 hours and just worked on this piece of art. If it's a 6 out of 10 of that, of what I'm able to produce, it's good enough. You know, you basically have to, you know, learn to temper your own expectations a bit. The question obviously then is, well, how do I push myself then to do new things, right? Well, depends. I suppose you wouldn't necessarily lose the will to try new things, but you just have to unfortunately, you just have to catch yourself not slacking off, you know, when you're doing these specific, say, study sessions, right? Yes, I'm yapping a lot. I'm talking a whole lot of shit. Um, I just want to now remind myself what's actually important of all of the things that I just said. So, point 1 is keeping in check for myself now, right? I'm trying to keep in check my need to perform or produce in an acceptable way, which is basically what we talked about with this 6 out of 10 framework. So let me just note here, temper your expectations. Temper your expectations. Apostrophe 6 out of 10, I guess. Just so that I can remember this, you know, what this relates to. Then I want to make sure that I learn to do, so learn to do the things you think boring before the usual doodles. So this is like hyper specific to myself. You know, this is advice that may or may not apply. Mostly probably won't. Before the doodles. I also want to reframe using reference reframe it as getting accustomed, that's a point I made earlier, accustomed to this like more refined art style. I was talking German for a second. This a more, in a way, refined art style. So whenever I'm drawing from reference, you can tell the line quality is very different, incredibly different. Where once you know that I've drawn from reference in this case, but and not in a different one, you can just draw a pattern from that because you will immediately just recognize how I draw. I mean, yeah, mostly. In some instances, like for example, this kind, where it's stuff that I've barely drawn or something that's very new to me, it's not immediately clear. Like this could have just been from imagination as well, you know, but this actually was from reference. It's just very poorly done. Yes, and I just want to reframe my way of considering reference, you know, instead of a way to cheat, as a way of getting accustomed to this different way of making marks in a way, in a sense. So getting accustomed is getting accustomed to this quote more refined style. Okay, more refined art style. I also kind of want to focus my mind a bit more on drawing everything first, but I still haven't resolved my issue with doing a bunch of ovals, you know, for my constructions. I don't find that particularly helpful or attractive or interesting, or most of the things you would use as a category to describe whether or not you want to draw something, right? I just hate, I really do. I'm channeling my inner hater. I just hate the way of going like this, you know? Okay, there's an oval here, there's an oval here, there's another circle here, something else here, and then this something like here. I hate this. I hate this so much. I can't describe to you how much I hate this. All right. So, enough talking. I think I wrote everything down now. Took me like, what's the way of saying this? 3/4 of an hour, quarter, 3/4 of an hour. Is there like a quick way to say this in English? 3/4 of an hour. Well, it almost took me 45 minutes, you know? So, well, I guess more closer to like 30 minutes or 34 minutes, 35 minutes, which is long enough. I talked enough for the next few days in terms of my art. So, yes, I want to also focus to not do too much. Like, I want to make sure that I want to reorder like my approach, right? Which I wrote down as learn to do the things you think boring before the doodles, right? So before doing something like this, right, I would want to go ahead and do something more like this, right? Or drawing a few boxes in perspective, like I did here, But a few more perhaps, or doing the warm-ups for like line control and stuff like that. I want to rearrange my approach in that I do these things first, but I also don't want to beat myself down with those things because I do consider them boring, you know, and just I just can't really concentrate on them for too long. I don't want to draw all of my energy out with things that I find unsatisfying. But I still need to do them. So I'll just try and do them for however long I think I can keep it up. And then I go on to just freely doodle whatever interests me, with or without reference, however I feel like. So in a way, it's the same concept as in training your muscles when you're like building muscles or just going to the gym, right? You want to, in a way that doesn't hurt you more than you need to be hurt, right? Um, you train to failure, right? So you train up until the point where your muscles just give out, right? In a controlled and um, safe way, essentially, right? You don't want to fail or train to fail when you're, I don't know, lifting weights that are way too heavy for you. You don't want to do squats with, I don't know, 200 pounds on your shoulders when you just simply can't do that kind of training, right? It's essentially that type of principle. I just want to apply it on my art as well. So yeah, I want to do the boring stuff up until the point where I'm like, okay, if I keep doing this, I'm getting mad or tired or whatever it is, right? And then I go on to just doodle freely, however I feel like, whatever I feel like, for however long I feel like doing it. And I'll try to temper my expectations when I'm doing fan art, when I'm going to attempt one once more. For now, I just want to focus on setting the things up in such a way that I have like a routine ready that I can follow, you know, where I now only have to switch out the studying material in a way, but I don't have to overhaul the entire structure every single time, right? So yes, I just want an easily repeatable method to get anywhere really. Something that I can actually stick with. So yes, I just don't want to end up producing the stuff from week 12. Let me see if it was week 12. I'm pretty sure it was. Maybe. Yes, right. So I don't just want to produce this type of stuff and then end the stream for the day, and then question myself if what I did was actually interesting, fun, or otherwise to my liking. So I don't just want to produce this and then end stream. Yeah, that's no, it's not interesting. So anyway, I'm gonna mute myself now, get to drawing, and I hope you learned something from the little monologue I held here. I hope you make your own notes. Hope you observe yourself enough to notice the mistakes you're making, the stuff that you're avoiding, and find a way to, incorporate that type of stuff. Because I think, and I mean that just as I say it. And it's, at least in my case, true. So I don't know if it applies to you. So it might just be what Nietzsche said, wherein philosophy is basically own explanation, one's explanation of one's own psychological ailments in a way, or I think that's in spirit what he said, right? Might be misremembering something, but anyway, um, I honestly think that the stuff I'm avoiding is exactly the things that I should be doing to improve. So it's kind of like backwards, right? You'd think you don't know what you're doing and you don't know where you're going, right? But eventually you'll develop like a sense of recognizing patterns, right? Within yourself, like thought patterns, or just um, patterns in how you act, right? That basically describe, or that surround, how to, no, wait, let me rephrase this. And you notice them avoiding certain aspects of the thing that you're doing, right? For example, um, I really, really, really don't want to do anatomy, and I somehow always find a way to not do anatomy. I think, honestly, that that's, especially now, since I'm avoiding this so vehemently, right? I think that's the thing that I should be doing right now, you know? So it's like, instead of coming up with a plan of what to do, you just look at the things that you hate doing the most right now. Like in this specific context of art, I don't know how much this would apply to any other field, but at least in art, I notice a few things that I'm always avoiding, masterfully almost, that honestly I think are the very things that I should be doing now to improve. So, yes, I'm kind of using my own dislike of a thing in art as reason to learn about it. Well, I'm not actively doing it right now, but that's essentially where I would like to end up. So I don't have this inhibition. But anyway, I'm getting distracted again. Time to draw. Throat is sore anyway from all the talking, and yeah, I'm gonna go now. Gonna mute myself rather. I mean, um, and yeah, I'll be right back. Actually, I'll have to step away a little bit here, 5 minutes or so, and then we get to drawing. We probably will be doing some primitive forms, intersections, stuff like that. We'll see. Because I'm actually trying to follow a little bit of Drawbox tutorials, because I found that when I first figured I could start my drawing journey at Drawbox, I thought these exercises were super boring and uninteresting, and I don't need them. And oh wait, there's this guy that doesn't make straight lines, but he's somehow still producing insanely good-looking art. So I don't obviously need this kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm trying to rectify that and see what lessons I can do from their website. And yeah, so I'll probably be drawing a few boxes, primitive shapes, that stuff. And I'll try to not force myself too much to follow this, too closely, or rather to do it, not the lessons themselves. I want to complete them as they are required, right? But I mean, I don't want to just spend my time doing that for the entire day, right? For the entire drawing session. Because I really, once I step away from the computer and my stream here, I don't draw for the rest of the day. There's occasionally a few times when, you know, my boredom in a way compels me to draw, because it's just in a relaxing thing to do, just doodling anything really, without real guidelines or anything. I just doodle whatever comes to mind. That's relaxing, but I don't do it every day. I try, while not conscious now anymore, I try not to, you know, preoccupy my mind constantly with drawing. I want to draw and learn about the things that I'm interested in, and starting today onwards, right? A few of the things that I find boring, right? Learning about those. And then I want to relax. I want that, to be put in a box and hidden in the back of my mind, right? So then I do something else. Anyway, gonna go now. And I'll return in about 5 minutes or something. And then we'll get to drawing. All right. I'll probably see you at the end, although I'm not quite feeling like it, so probably not. So then have a very nice rest of your day. In case I don't see you anymore, or don't talk to you anymore, rather. And yeah, try to have fun. And try to balance it out with the things that you find unfun.